Hello everyone and welcome back to Video Editing 1 with Professor Harris. Today's lesson is lesson 4 and we're going to be getting into drag and drop editing. Media Composer offers the flexibility to edit any way you want. So if you've been itching to drag and drop your clips into the timeline, your moment has finally come. To avoid forgetting everything that we've learned in previous lessons, you should probably go back and watch those lessons. But for now, let's get into the goals for this lesson. Let me drag this to the center so we're looking at it. So we're going to use the segment mode tools, alter settings to optimize the segment mode tools, build a montage sequence using drag and drop techniques, add narration, and adjust audio levels in the sequence. Let's get started. First thing we're going to be covering is understanding the segment mode. So Media Composer is fundamentally modal. So we have source/record editing mode, segment mode, trim mode, effect mode, and so on. So we've been getting used to different modes here in Avid. Two tools make up the segment mode though. So we have lift/overwrite and extract/splice in. These tools let you build a sequence by dragging clips directly into the timeline. Because you'll work with segment tools throughout this lesson, let's take a moment to identify them and their configuration so we can understand the segment mode button. This is the segment mode button right here. If I right click it, we can see the different settings. So we have the lift and overwrite tool and the extract and splice in tool. And we can set these we can make them both active at the same time by making sure that they're both clicked. I could alternatively turn off one and then click this and we'll see it switch to the lift and overwrite, or I can switch it over to just extract and splice in, click again, and then we're switched over. So that's a quick way to do that. Or again, right clicking, we can just activate them both. And then click, and now they're both active. And then it operates as a smart tool. You can also quickly switch this with the default keyboard setup by holding Shift A and Shift S. So we can enable both extract and splice as well as lift and overwrite. So let's say I hit Shift A. I mean, you're gonna have to just play with it until you see what you're looking for. But right now I have extract and splice in activated. If I hit Shift A, it'll activate the overwrite tool. If I hit Shift S, then it'll disable the extract and splice in, and then I can hit Shift S again, and we've got both active. So there are a few different ways to just switch between those. So let's talk about the segment mode as a smart tool. I mentioned that a few seconds ago that with both of these active, this becomes a smart tool. How so? Well, Media Composer automatically switches the active tool as you move the cursor within the timeline track. So when we're down here in the timeline, moving the cursor around, it's going to change. You can see my cursor is changing colors, it's changing position, so it's changing it's changing the shape too. So each one of these little changes means something. If you activate all segment and trim tools, we're going to learn more about this in lesson 5, and the transition manipulation tool, which we're going to learn more about in lesson 6 in the timeline palette. So if we're activating these guys, then we can work together. It can all work together as one dynamic smart tool. And here's how. When we place the cursor in the middle of a clip in the timeline, it changes to a segment mode arrow. So I'm going to do that. Get a segment mode arrow. And we would use the segment mode to move clips in the timeline. When we move the cursor near an edit point, this would be a transition between one clip or another, or one audio clip and another, we're going to see these rollers show up. And this changes the cursor I'm using to a trim tool. When we place a position cursor over the top half of a track, so if we come up here to the top of a track, the red functions are active. This is the segment mode or trim roller. And then the bottom half of the track activates the yellow functions, extract and splice in. So when we get lower in the track, we'll see it turn yellow, higher it turns red. And then when we move the cursor over a transition effect such as a dissolve, I don't have any dissolves or transition effects to show you here, but it changes to the transition manipulation tool. Again, we're going to cover more of that in lesson 6. So these buttons activate your mouse to become and do different things here make it a smart tool in the timeline. By default, you can enable and disable these smart tools by pressing Shift Tab. So if I hit Shift Tab, we're going to see them both become disabled, or I can enable them. And this is a quick function because if you're trying to move the position indicator in our timeline, we're working off the TC1 middle guy here, and we're trying to move things, and we're accidentally activated. I didn't mean to move that. So a lot of editors will leave this map to like Shift Tab so they can disable that, so they don't accidentally start dragging clips around and messing up their perfectly good edits. All right, let's look now at some Smart Tool settings. You can customize the segment tool and how it behaves independently as a Smart Tool or by adjusting other related settings. You would do this by going to the Edit tab in the Timeline settings. This is a user setting, so once you save this on your user profile, it would follow you anywhere you went. To get there, though, we're going to want to right-click in the timeline, and we can come down here to Timeline Settings. Alternatively, you could go up through Timeline and Timeline Settings. And we're going to make sure we're clicked on the Edit tab here. All right, sweet. So I have a reference image here from the book. We're going to go ahead and look at this. Oop. We're going to leave this. I'm going to make this a little bit shorter so that I can reference the timeline while we're looking at this at the same time. Okay, sweet. So the first thing is the Select Filler with Segment tool. This controls whether segment tools treat a gap as filler, segment, or as a blank space. So we know that filler is not just blank space typically in Avid, but you could use this setting to make it blank space. Filler can be edited and things can be added onto it, such as effects and other things. When disabled, the segment tools ignores filler segments and treats these gaps as non-selectable empty space. So it is enabled by default. So there's that for your reference. Clicking the TC track or ruler disables the Smart tool. So you can change it so that when you do start hitting this TC1 track, or when you start scrubbing along here, moving the position indicator, that it would automatically turn off your Smart tools, your editing tools. And this would save you from, like I said earlier, accidentally clicking something shortly thereafter and moving something in your segment and damaging your hard work already. Only one segment tool can be enabled at a time. So this is another setting where it controls whether you have both segment tools active simultaneously. A reason for this might be, let's say you're like, okay, I just want to shorten things up, and I just want to use one tool to do this. I don't want to accidentally overwrite. I don't want to accidentally do something else. You could set it so it's only accomplishing one function. So no matter where you click, you don't have to worry about, am I at the top of my segment here? Am I at the bottom? Am I going to activate the wrong thing when I'm trying to add or adjust a cut? Whatever it may be. This is disabled by default because Avid Media Composer wants you to get familiar with the Smart tool and being proficient with the Smart tool. It's up to you, whatever you would like to do. I would recommend keeping the Smart tool enabled and just trying to be conscious of not accidentally editing your scene. But when you spend 9 hours, 10 hours, 40 hours editing in post, you're going to be very tired and mistakes will be made. So if this is beneficial to you, go ahead and feel free to turn that on. And then the default segment tool controls which edit type a drag and drop edit performs when both segment tools are either enabled or disabled. So this would set it so you could have one setup as a primary. So, all right. Now that you've previewed the segment mode and its capabilities, you're ready to build a sequence with drag and drop editing. But wait, there's more. So let's move into a simple concept that will make learning this and mastering this a little bit easier. So we have the concept color-coded tools. So as you've seen, Media Composer has red and yellow segment tools, as well as red and yellow trim tools. We've been looking at them. This reflects a simple design theme, color code tools with similar behaviors. So they have similar functions, and once you understand those functions in contrast with their colors, it'll make it easier when you look at and try and understand the functions of other tools. So red equals stop. These tools affect only the segments or tracks you manipulate. Like a four-way traffic stop, all other timeline elements stay locked in place while you move, trim, or edit the segment or track you selected. So when we're looking at the red boys, we should be thinking this is only going to affect what I have selected. So right now I have B1 and A1 selected. If I move this, it's going to move exactly that and only that. And when I let go of it, none of my other tracks are going to move. Everything's going to stay in place. All the sync is going to maintain. These videos are all still synced up. Now, yellow equals caution. I'm going to undo the thing I just did. Yellow equals caution when moving objects. So these tools affect the segments you manipulate plus the ones downstream. Since multiple elements move, you need to pay close attention, hence the color yellow. If you don't, you could break sync by inadvertently moving audio or video materials without moving the video or audio mate. So let's say I accidentally have A1 deselected and I've got my smart tool ready and I've got my yellow and I start sliding. Whoops, I'm leaving my audio behind. This is affecting sync and we are not going to be hearing what we should. Similarly over here, if I just start moving this, if I deselect that track and I start moving stuff, all of this has just been broken. So when you're using yellow, you should be thinking caution, caution. How is this affecting my track? If I'm way down and I'm on something else further down in the track, I don't know why it's not scrolling, but if I was way farther down, hours into my thing, and I hit this and I start manipulating stuff, I do not want to affect sync further down the line or upstream. So that is the difference between the red and yellow. All right, let's move on to building a montage with the drag and drop features. We are editing. The fundamental workflow for editing basic video package is the same whether you use professional three-point editing techniques or drag and drop methods. Did you see what the book just did there? It just threw shade at drag and drop. Not that drag and drop isn't still a function that you will need to use, but that you should probably be using other functions as well, specifically keyboard shortcuts. But in this lesson, the corresponding exercises, you'll build a sample video montage underscored by music and narration. As you learn different tools, you'll also explore a fresh approach to cutting. You get to decide which approach you'll use at any moment. Each has its advantages. As you grow more familiar with Media Composer, you'll likely switch between tools and techniques to meet the situation at hand. You should be switching. You should be familiarizing yourself with the program and switching techniques. So let's move on now to emptying the timeline and creating a sequence. So we have a sequence already loaded. We're already looking at something. But let's say we're in our sequence folder here. We already have two versions of the sequence. We have Rock Climber opening, we have Rock Climber promo, and neither of them are working. We don't like the sequences we have. We should make a new one. So to close the sequence we have open, we can do one of the following. We can right-click the record monitor and choose Clear Monitor here. Or we can go to Clip Name in the menu at the top of the record monitor and select Clear Monitor. For ease, I'm just going to hit Clear Monitor here. So boom, we have closed the sequence that we had open. Now, with the timeline empty, you can create a new sequence. We're going to drag a clip to the timeline. So by default, when you drag a clip from your bins, so let's go to Video Files, to the timeline, it's going to create a new sequence. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's pick a clip, and we'll go, yes, this will be our opening clip. We can see our source tracks have activated because we've loaded the clip into the source monitor. So let's pick it in and out. Oh, that slow motion audio sounds great. Even better. All right, we love it. So now we'll drag and drop it into the timeline. And it's going to prompt us to create a new sequence, or where to store this new sequence. So we're going to click Sequences because we have a bin already for sequences that we're creating. And I'll go ahead and click OK. Awesome. So now we have a new sequence added to our timeline. Or we've created a new sequence. It's been added to our sequences bin. And we can see it's titled Untitled Sequence. We're going to want to give it a meaningful name. we'll just do version 3, and then that will keep us in order. I didn't make these first two, otherwise I might have named them. I'm pretty sure they're different edits though. Anyway, all right, now we've got our new sequence loaded up. Let's start adding clips. But proper sequence labeling and organization, don't forget that. Okay, adding clips with the drag and drop. Once we create our sequence and we have our sequence created, our beautiful and lovely sequence, I would like to move this out the way. It's very obnoxious. We could change the way we zoom in and out on our project with this bar here, with the scale bar, because I'm going to add a bunch of clips onto the end of this, and I wanted a little more space. There we go. Now it looks smaller. Perfect. So we got our new sequence. Let's start loading in clips. So we'll load a clip into the source monitor. We'll load our next clip into the source monitor. Maybe we'll move to this one. And then we're going to set our in and out marks where we want them. Yep. Okay, let me go back. I'm going to get that hand as it comes in, out.
Nope.
Cool. Now we have a shot. We've set our marks. We've got our active source tracks, green. You see them on the left. And where we're going to tell Media Composer where we want this new information to go to. We can ignore the record track selectors. When you're dragging and dropping a clip, it's determined by where it lands. What did you just say? Yes, I did just say that. You can ignore where the record track selectors are set up with drag and drop editing, because where you drop them is where they'll land. So whereas with splice in and overwrite, again, V and B on your keyboards, if I had loaded this in the source monitor, and this is loaded in the source monitor, and I hit V or B, it's going to drop where the position indicator is by default. But when I drag and drop, watch what happens here. Ooh, I can select exactly where it's going to go. So there's no guesstimating as to how this is going to land. I can pick specifically where that will. It by default, I believe it does snap to, but if you remember the last lesson, we talked about the importance of holding Command, and so that it always snaps at the perfect head frame, or Command Option, so it always snaps at the perfect last frame. So if you're doing this kind of drag and drop editing, you are 100% going to want to make sure you're holding these modifier keys so that you're not getting flash frames. All right, sweet. Next thing, we're going to check the segment tool in the timeline palette and enable the yellow splice in button if necessary. So we can click on this bad boy and make sure we're just selected on the splice in and not the overwrite. I'll explain more as to why that is later, but and then we can just drag and drop from the source monitor to our preferred timeline tracks, so we can be picking our clips if we haven't already set marks.
Oh my God. Wow. Did you catch that? Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, picking what we want, and then just boom, dragging and dropping, making sure we're holding Command, and adding our clips one on top of the other. Sweet. Cool. And then we will repeat. Excuse me. English. We will repeat to build our rough cut. We'll keep repeating this process, selecting the clips, the specific clips. I'm obviously randomly selecting clips, and then you will load them in your source monitor, set your in and out marks, and then keep dragging into your timeline where you want them to be. If both segment tools are active, you're cutting in a non-linear fashion, one shot after another. Either or both tools can be active. So I did talk about making sure we only had, I don't know why it's on segment tool, only having the splice in tool, but we can have both active. That's perfectly fine to build this way. So what if you want to insert a shot between two shots though? Now you'll set up for the drag and drop edit with splice in and extract/splice in. You can either enable just the yellow splice in button in the segment tool menu, so we could just be set to yellow here, or we could go to File, Settings, and then User tab, Timeline Settings, Edit tab, and ensure that the default segment tool option is set to Segment Insert. You don't have to do that. You don't have to make sure that your defaults are set. If you know how to do this, if you know how to hold Shift A and be switching back and forth between Shift A and Shift S, You can be switching there, or you could not be lazy and just be right-clicking this and picking what you want. This would be the way that we're going to put clips in between. So we will load one, as usual, into the source monitor. So we'll load a clip into the source monitor. We're going to play it. We're going to set our ins. We're going to set our outs. And then you'll check our source track selectors and drag the clip to its insert point in the timeline. But we won't drop it yet because we, again, like I said, are going to want to hold the modifier keys Shift Option or Command Option or just Command. We're going to make sure we're hitting those head frames so that we're not causing flash frames. So let's say I want to go between this R919 and this R36. We're going to make sure we hold Command or Command Option, and it's going to want to snap around to the right spots. Then we can let go, and boom, we made sure again that we've got it dropped exactly where we want it. If you're trying to do this with the overwrite tool, the lift and overwrite segment tool, watch what's going to happen here. It's going to want to just cover up. That's all it's going to want to do. So I would drop it, and it would completely replace the shots that were underneath. So now we've affected our timeline. But if we were trying to rearrange these things or add new shots in between, remember we would be using the extract and splice in. Cool. Let's get into adding narration with the drag and drop overwrite function. So pictures may be worth 1,000 words, but sometimes a story is best articulated and advanced by concise narration or a soundbite from an interview. Unlike video tracks, audio tracks often have gaps between segments. To add a voiceover to a sequence, you'll use the lift/overwrite tool, which is this bad boy in red. And you can use this tool with audio or video material, but it works especially well with audio and when working with audio edits. So when you drag and drop a voiceover clip to a sequence, you can technically use either of the segment tools, but this can create limitations. If you splice in a narration rather than overwrite the clip before an existing audio segment, this clip moves forward in time, a problem if the segment's voiceover describes a specific video. So if I'm trying to add audio narration to these clips here, and I use the splice in, it's going to want to stick it in between. We know splice in is going to stick it in between, and this content here is going to get pushed down. So the overwrite tool nicely pastes over top what we're trying to show and listen to at the same time. All right, so instead to take advantage of nonlinear editing and ensure you don't unintentionally move audio segments, we'll use the lift and overwrite tool. So to do this, first we want to activate it properly. So we'll right click here and we'll just set it to red. So it's the lift and overwrite tool. Done there. Again, we could be using Shift A and Shift S and things like that to do this. Next, we'll click the toggle source record button in the timeline down here. Remember this, if we wanted to load audio here into, so we could see it in waveform style, we could click this and we could click that waveform button, and so we could be looking more what we want from this clip. I already have an in on this clip, so let's see. I'm going to play a little bit before. Okay, so yeah, he was prepping, so now I have an in. We're going to see here. I'll set an out when we're satisfied with what we got.
When I get to the rack, I usually put down all my bags and just look up and really just take in where I am. And I put on my shoes and strap all my equipment on and tie myself to the rock and get going.
That was good. The wind picked up at the end.
Okay, so I set an out. We'll use that for now. It's not the perfect bite, but we'll go from there. We'll toggle back to the timeline. So now we have our in and out marks. That's very good. We'll set our in and out marks, as I just said, and we'll enable the source audio tracks in green and disable the V1 if working on a video clip. So we want to only take the audio from this shot. We have a video. We've loaded it in the source monitor. We don't want to take the video with us. So all we have to do is uncheck this V1. So now the video will not come with it. All we will be taking from this clip is its audio. Awesome. So again, with just the lift and overwrite tool enabled, that would be this red we're going to drag the clip from the source monitor to a position in the timeline where we want it. So go ahead and drag it, and we're going to make sure we hold Command here so it snaps to different edit points. I'm going to set it here because I think it's going to work best here. So let's play and see what we got now in the record monitor.
When I get to the rack, I usually put down all my bags and just look up and really just take in where I am. And I put on my shoes and strap all my equipment on and tie myself to the rock and get going.
So I won't lie to you, I obviously picked these clips out. I wanted this to line up a little bit more with what was there. And I added this audio over the audio that was already there. So if I hit Command Z to undo adding this audio, what the heck? It just added another track. Oh no, it did undo it. So if I did add this audio back in, we can see that I could have set it on A2. I could set it to the second audio channel. And if I drop it here, we'll hear the audio for these clips as well at the same time. That's the beauty of the overwrite tool, is that I can just replace this audio. So if I click play, we're going to hear all kinds of weird
when I get to the rack, I
clanking.
usually take in where I am. And
we can hear slow-mo gibberish. But instead, because I use the overwrite tool, when I drug this audio in, it just boom, seamlessly covered up that audio that was there before, and now
when I get to the rack, I
we don't get that metal clanking,
take in where I am.
we don't get that nasty slow-mo audio effect, and so on. So that would be a successful audio overwrite edit here, matching it to our shots that we wanted. If you prefer to keep both the lift and overwrite and extract and splicing tools active in the timeline palette, you can. However, before performing a series of lift and overwrite drag and drop edits, you might want to go into the default segment tool settings and then set it to segment overwrite. Again, you don't have to do that. You could just not be lazy and be using your A and your S to switch between the different tools here, or right-clicking and so on and so forth. But if you were going to do a bunch of this, if you were set up and you said, okay, let's get that narration in, you might want to go into the settings and activate that. Develop the habit of editing your audio material onto tracks by audio type. That is dialogue and sound effects and music and so on. So if we start renaming these, remember how we were renaming these last times? So let's change this to dialogue. If we get into the habit of doing this and making sure we're doing this, it won't be a bad habit to break later, right? That way, your project grows. When it grows in scale and complexity, your sequences will remain organized and you won't need to unlearn your bad habits. Adjusting sequence audio levels. As you already experienced, you'll work with clips that are too loud or too quiet. In Lesson 2, Getting Started, you made some rough adjustments to source clips. When you play your sequence, slight differences in levels become obvious. This can disrupt your creative flow and pull your viewers out of the story. Therefore, it's best to adjust audio levels in the sequence during the editing process. Many professional editors who mix their own audio, known as sweetening, do this as a dedicated stage in their editing workflow. So the initial adjustments move them closer to the final goal. Let's look at how to make simple adjustments so the music doesn't blow out your speakers or ears, and you can clearly hear people talking when appropriate. The companion course to this book, Media Composer Fundamentals 2 MC101, digs deeper into audio tools and basic audio sweetening techniques. So we will get to that later this semester. But let's get to setting up for audio work. So before you can adjust audio in your sequence, you need to set up the track control panel in the timeline. You've done this for source audio, and setting up for sequence audio adjustments is just as quick and easy. But before we do that, we don't really have music yet. We have this narration audio here.
Usually put down all my bags.
This interview audio. Let's add some music over top of this. So we'll go ahead and go to our audio files bin here. We'll click this first one. We'll load it into the source monitor, and then we'll set our ins and outs as to where we want the music to play. My goodness, that is loud. So we can already tell this is super blasted. But we'll just add it to our sequence anyway, just because we like it loud. All right. What is going on here? Oh, I don't have my record tracks selected, which are nowhere to be seen. No, where's my source track? Oh, it's mapped to the wrong thing. Come on. Ah, this is a stereo. Command Shift U. Bingo. Now we have a stereo track. So there you go. Quick note there. This is a stereo audio file, so I can only pair it to a stereo audio track. So now when I drag this down to the bottom, it will appear. All right, let's set this. Let's set this here on, and I'll hold Command to snap to that first frame. So now we have audio with our interview going on at the same time. I'm going to delete these tracks because I don't need these other tracks. I'll delete A2 as well. Cool. And we'll rename this track while we're at it to music. Cool. All right, let's play this and see how it sounds. That is blasting. We can't hear anything that's going on. So let's prepare our timeline for level adjustments. In the timeline, we'll click the disclosure triangle next to the green time code window to open the track control panel. That's already selected. We can already see these things, but again, for your reference, this is the track control panel. So we'll expand that. We'll Alt or Option click on Mac the audio wave tracks waveform button. So we can Option click a waveform, and it's going to show us waveforms for everything. If we look at this, I'm going to increase this track size real quick. So I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to hit, remember, Command L. It's going to increase the size on that. And if we're looking at this, our audio levels are so high, it's just one solid black bar. So I'm going to adjust the wave height without actually adjusting the wave level by doing Command Option K, and that will decrease that so that we can actually see what we're looking at. Again, this hasn't fixed the audio levels. If I hit play, it's just as blasted out. So that's just adjusting the way it appears and not necessarily the audio levels. But let's adjust the audio levels now. So we can Alt or Option click the audio data button. This is the audio data button. So we will Alt Option click there. And then on clip gain, while holding the Alt or Option button, we will select the clip gain option from the audio menu. Oh, it went away. And then, there we go, all kinds of fun stuff shows up. The timeline shows your clip's audio waveform patterns and a decibel graph overlay, plus a clickable audio fader icon appears in the bottom left corner of each segment. And that's this little guy here, these little clip gain adjusters. So we know our audio is blasting out here. So we can go ahead and click this little audio adjustment, and we can slide this fader down, and we can click play. Getting better. We're going to keep going down with it. We're going to go really far.
Look up and...
Well, now we can't hear the music at all, so we'll turn it up again.
Really just take in where I am. And
it's a little bit obnoxious. We'll go down a little bit more. We'll go to 40.
I put on my shoes and strap all my equipment on and tie myself to the rock and get going.
That was good. The wind
Maybe a little bit lower. We'll go 40. We'll go 43. Let's try that. Let's try 43.
When I get to the rock, I usually put down all my bags and just look up and really just take in where I am. And I put on my shoes and strap all my equipment on and tie myself to the rock and get going.
Okay, much better. So quick note, a white waveform means that the segment sample rate differs from your project's designated sample rate. If you see this and you find it distracting, you can disable it by going to File, Settings, and then clicking the Project tab, then opening the Audio Project Settings. In the main tab of the Audio Project Settings, you can change the Show Mismatch Sample Rates as different color, and you can click this option to say no. So quick note there. While making adjustments, you'll want to measure audio levels with more precise meters than those at the top of the timeline. You can open the audio tool, which includes large and easy to read audio meters. Note that the audio tool also performs other functions, hence the name audio tool. But to open the audio tool, we'll do the following. we'll choose Tools, and then we'll go to Audio Tool. What did we learn there? What's something we can learn real quick? We look at Tools and we see Audio Tool. We can see Command 1 is a default mapped keyboard button. So if you want to open the Audio Tool, that is Command 1. Should be, again, looking at these things as we go through Timeline, Command 0, all kinds of stuff. So boom, here's our little Audio Tool. It has now appeared on our screen. And as you can see, the Audio Tool opens in a floating window, but you can dock it with other windows like the bin container, composer window, or timeline. So we could drag this little purple boy and we could say, oh, let's squeeze our little Audio Tool right here between our bin and our source monitor. So what is the right audio level? As a guideline, your sequence audio levels should balance between -20 and -8 decibels as measured by the digital values on the left side of the meter. Note many broadcasters publish delivery specifications that require audio levels to conform to a rigid set of standards. So you saw me crank this down to -43.1 decibels. That would probably never land in proper range, depending on the project or what you were working on and where it was supposed to go. But yes, so changing a segment's audio level. So for most videos or film scenes, the audio levels should be fairly consistent from shot to shot. When you encounter loud or soft audio segments, you'll want to fix these distractions. So you may have noticed Media Composer provides 2 timeline adjustments, the clip gain and volume adjusters. So for this course, you'll use clip gain to adjust the audio levels on a per segment basis. But to adjust those segment clip gains, you'll click the fader icon in the segment's corner. This here again, these little guys are those bottom left corner segment faders. But the clip gain fader replicates the audio mixer tool's fader you used in lesson 2. So the timeline reflects any clip gain adjustments you make in the audio mixer and vice versa. When you activate the timeline, you can either adjust each segment's audio levels in the audio mixer tool or directly in the sequence. So what does that mean? So this is just the audio tool. So let's drag the audio tool down here. So when I hit play, we'll watch these levels go up and down.
When I get to the rack,
So you can see where it's hitting on this chart. If we want to, it said, we can make these adjustments here on a segment basis, but if I open the audio mixer tool as well, I can make those same adjustments on. We can see that it's at +9 dB here, it's also at +9 dB here, and I could bring this down to 0, and we'll see 0.3, it's just slightly off. We can see that same adjustment is reflected there in the timeline as well. I will undo that and I will close this. So there's that for reference. But when you adjust clip gain in the timeline, you can use several useful shortcuts, and I have a table here directly from the book for that. So here are some shortcuts. I'm going to let you guys pause the video to take a moment to familiarize yourself with that. Using solo and mute, the timeline includes dedicated solo and mute buttons for each track. You can activate solo button to isolate audio or specific tracks and silence all others. Or you can click the mute button to silence a track's audio. So these silence and mute buttons are super helpful, and I'm going to explain why. With the solo and mute, you can choose which audio tracks you hear at any moment. This can eliminate frustration and wasted time when you're adjusting different levels, trying to isolate and figure out where a particular problem might be within your audio. So solo and mute, however, do nothing to help you balance the relative loudness between the distinct sounds. For that, you'll need to adjust the clip sequence, clip gain with the little faders, or using the audio mixer tool. Okay, so let's look at how solo and mute could work in this instance. So we've got 2 lines, 2 tracks. We've got dialogue and music. So I've hit play here.
I usually put down all my bags and...
Let's say we had a bunch of other things. Let's say we had multiple lines of dialogue for different characters. You might go, I'm hearing some breathing. Who is breathing? So you might have a bunch of different tracks for audio of people who are breathing, and you're trying to say, who is this? So you might just hit solo. So you'll solo, and that will automatically mute your other audio tracks. So now if I play this,
Just look up and
we'll see that we're only getting audio from this track. We're no longer hearing the music, and if there are other speaking characters, we wouldn't be hearing them either. We're like, oh, well, I'm not hearing the breathing now, right? So it's not this person who's breathing, so it must be one of these people. So if I hit solo, I can mute this one now and hit play. And there's nothing on this line, so it's not that either. Let's solo this one. Now we're only hearing the music. So again, M's mute. I mean, it just does what you think it would, and S is solo. So if you disable everything, then it'll revert back to the way that it was. Let's say that I didn't want the music at all. I could just solo this track and this one and this one, assuming there was audio on this that were different speaking characters. Then I could watch a scene and its pacing and listen to just the dialogue as it's being spoken and not have to worry about the music. And again, like the book says, you're still going to have to isolate which track it is, where whatever it is you're trying to edit out is. You can't just solely rely on the solo and mute function. You have to actually go in and adjust clip gain volumes and things like that. So that is solo and mute. Very useful functions, and I'm sure you'll end up using it more later as you go down the line. Cool. Let's move on now to using digital audio scrub. So as you focus on editing the audio, you might enable Media Composer's digital audio scrub feature. This plays the digital audio samples as you move the position indicator through the sequence. Since you'll hear the sound associated with each frame you pass over, you can precisely edit audio. For example, if you can't pinpoint the exact point between spoken words, you can use the digital audio scrub to slowly scrub the position indicator over audio segments. So digital audio scrub works the same whether you drag the position indicator or you use the step forward and step back buttons in the interface or keyboard. To enable digital audio scrub, though, you can do one of the following. We can just hold shift and drag through the timeline. So if I hold shift and drag this, we'll hear the audio as we go through the timeline. And the slower you go, the slower you go, the slower it's going to be, right? And you're going to hear on each individual line. But you can also map the toggle digital audio scrub button in the play tab from the command palette. So if we wanted to put it in our timeline buttons, if we wanted to be able to enable and disable this, so by default it's disabled, right? So if I slide this around, there's nothing. If I hold shift and then do it, we'll hear the audio. You can have a toggle on-off button that we map here. If we hit Command 3, that'll pull up the command palette, and then we'll go to play, and we'll go to toggle digital audio scrub, and we can drag this to an available button location right here on our timeline menu. So now we have that button there, and I can just click it, and when I slide this, we'll hear it. When I click it again, we won't hear it anymore. So that's another way to do that. With that, we wrap up this lesson, lesson 4. I highly encourage you. I'm your professor. I'm telling you now, go to the labs or wherever Avid Media Composer is functional, download this source footage, and start working immediately. Start getting used to these functions. Don't just watch these videos. Don't just read the book. Get in here and start working. When you make that association between content and the interface, you're going to learn the program much, much quicker, and you're going to be a lot more proficient with it, which is obviously the point of this class. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.